Hi guys, this is the Definite Article for Grinder School. Today I'm going to be recording three tables of 25NL Zoom. I think I'm going to start just by pointing out a few differences between the stakes at 25 and 50NL that I've noticed. I think the main one is that people at 25NL, the regs at least, are much worse at defending their blinds. They don't defend nearly often enough. You can simply get away with raising often close to any 2 on a button. I think the other main thing is that you don't really need to pay quite so much attention to your bet sizing in exploitative terms, in exploitable terms, in how exploitable it is rather. The reason behind that being that 25 and L regs are often going to say, oh, he has value hands or doesn't have value hands, and play accordingly. Rather than considering whether you can get to the river with hands that are now bluffs or hands which can be used as bluffs adequately. I think this is a spot where, against a 2.1x 4-bet, we need to develop a range of flatting odds positions as standard. With that said, he's been 4-betting 8% so far. I don't think he's a particularly good player, so he likely doesn't have many 4-bet bluffs. And as a result, we can just fold a lot of our range and simply not have such a range which flats 4-bets out of position. And also, naturally, the regs are a little bit worse. All the players are a little bit worse. So somebody who beats 50NL can pretty happily just loosen up significantly at 25NL and not be worried about it at all. So yeah, I think because this is a lower stake, I think I might end up trying to discuss a few more hands than I normally would, some spots that may seem standard. I suppose this might end up in having too much to talk about in some spots. Against some players, this could be a check. This guy seems a bit weak tight. I don't think he's going to exploit as if we have a checking range which is too weak. So I think we can just bet this for value / protection. I mean, we've never seen him raise a c-bet before, but on this board texture, I think especially blind versus blind, even though he seems fairly weak size over a limited sample, I think it's just a texture that we are often going to be c-betting with not much, and so we probably need to defend we develop quite a wide defense range. Here, I'm not sure how often he'd continue with bluffs. Obviously, lots of his bluffs got there, and I think he always continues with his sets. So I think, considering we don't know how often he's bluffing there, we can just revert to trying to play roughly unexploitably, and I think 10-9 off is low enough in our flop bet core range that we can just fold there without worrying. This is on table 2 with ace jack suited is fairly close. I'm going to fold because I don't expect this guy to squeeze too much because of under the gun's position. I don't expect our diamonds to be worth so much three-way because lots of their uses as hands which we can use as equity for bluffs, and obviously we're not going to want to bluff as often, so three-way. We're calling here because the big blinds who's squeezing is a fish, and we often want to keep the button in the pot who's also a fish. I think 8s against a reg squeeze, especially, well, I suppose the squeeze is fairly small as well, so that's a justification for calling the squeeze, but I think nonetheless against a reg squeeze 8 would just be a fold there. Though I am aware that some mid-stakes and high-stakes players are now starting to flat 3-bets, both in position and out of position with most pairs. I think Ace-8 is strong enough to use on the flop as a showdown value hand. When he pots a river, I expect him to have a 5 an overwhelming majority of the time. I think he's probably a fish given his half pot sizing on a flop and pot sizing on the river, though it's not certain, but I use my tags more as an indication than anything else. I think an ace is strong enough to call pre-flop against a fish, and when he checks back the flop I expect his range to be overwhelmingly weak. So we're just going to bet twice and expect to fold out most of his range, and obviously once he gets to the river he can't really fold that, but it's a pity that he did manage to get to the river. Or at least it's a pity for our specific hand. It's pretty bad for his range to get to the river. It's pretty good for our range rather, for him to get to the river with that hand. All those guys are fish, and it's a dry board, so he's often calling the pairs. I think our hand's strong enough to double barrel this turn with basically the nut hand to do it with. And we need to check back the river because he can sometimes have a 6, he can sometimes have draws which miss, so there's no real purpose in using a hand as a bluff. I'm a little concerned that I'm not sure what happened pre here. I think I probably need to bet call this nonetheless, and obviously we're just shoving this turn now. I think Ace King is a good check back here, because it plays pretty well as a showdown value hand. There are very few turns in rivers which are bad for it. When big blind pots a flop here, it's just a standard fold. Possibly it's high enough in our flop jacking range against a fish for it to be a defend from a game theory perspective, but I just don't think it's necessary to do that. I don't think it's necessary to take that into account against fish, and furthermore, when he pots a flop, he's probably overwhelmingly value heavy, especially after cold calling a 3-bet pre-flop. I have no reads on what this guy donks a flop with, so I'm just going to call. I think that's a standard play anyway, but obviously you can change this. We're betting slightly bigger than we would otherwise because it's a fish. Turn's close. I think probably just checking back is best, because I think we're going to struggle to get 2 streets of value, and there aren't that many scare cards on the river for us, though that's one. And obviously we can't really get value on the river. Okay, I'm going to take a note on that. I think, well, it's I don't know what day it is. It's a Saturday night here, so I think a lot of this video is going to be largely focusing on maximal exploitation against fish. Here we're going to 3x kings on the button because there's 2 fish in the blinds. And we can get decent value as a result. We're going to bet slightly bigger than usual on the flop because there are lots of straight draws we expect him to call with, and also we maximise value from Queen X's way. When he donks small on the turn, I think we just want to raise and get lots of money in as quickly as possible, because I think he rarely takes his line with a 6, and even if he does, it's a small part of his range. Here, I think the turn is a standard bet. There are so many draws that he can have that we can definitely get value from a queen here against the fish. We isolate pre because we're very happy to play 2 Broadway cards in position against a fish. And I think this river is a check back. He doesn't have very many weak queen X, and obviously we can no longer get value from his draws, so it isn't. I don't think it's profitable against his calling range. I don't think we're ahead of his calling range. Is my points. I think sixes is probably on the border. Would normally against most people be on the border between a bet and a check here, but against a guy who's folding 63% C bets over a not ridiculously small sample. We can bet for value/protection, well, more for protection than as a bluff. We can bet probably 100% of our range on this flop. And I think another weakness of 25 and LZ regs is that they're going to be folding too many of their small blind opens to 3-bets. With a small blind folding 90% of steals and a fish in a big blind, you can probably open 100% range on the button. Though obviously we have to fold this particular hand to a 3-bet. With lots of short stackers behind us, including the fish we're mostly targeting in the big blind, we probably want to open a little smaller with our range here. Though I think if he shoved, it's probably a call, just because a short stacks fish is likely to be shoving much wider than he should, and so we're probably guessing the odds to call against his range. We can squeeze king queen here. It's a pretty good hand to squeeze. And when SS, or I assume that stands for short stack, but whatever, leads the turn, I think his range is strong enough, and at least I don't think he's, I think he's likely to be condensed in that spot. I don't think ace-10 is strong enough to call. We're calling here because we're against a nit, and at 25 we don't expect to get squeezed very often. It's feasible for this guy to check queens on the turn, but I think that's a small enough part of his range that we can still bet at least one street, possibly two streets for value on lots of runouts. Oh God, I didn't read my note there. Yeah, that's clearly what I was supposed to say. I think pocket threes is just best to give up here. We don't have much forward equity on this type of board, especially with a fish in the pot, because there are so many straight draws for them to continue with, and we have basically no equity against the calling range. Well, obviously we're ahead of a straight draw now, but they will have a minimum of 10 hours against us, and that's only a small part of his range. In addition, we're not really going to be comfortable calling turn/river bets. We're just going to fold here. We're folding an exploitable amount of 3-bets probably in that spot, but I don't expect people to 3-bet it often enough at 25. We are min-raising on button. I've explained this before, but I'll explain this again. Basically, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make at the micro stakes is that they have ranges which they fold far too much to steals in the big blind. In the blinds against its 3-betting range, we're just 4-betting pretty large and hoping to get it in. And here we're betting twice the value. I don't think it matters that we rarely have bluffs here. I think the sizing's a bit big. If against a fish, that'll be fine, but against a reg, it's too big. I think we can 3-bet this out as the small blind against a fish. We're folding to a 4-bet, but I think we're probably ahead of his calling range, considering he most likely 4-bets ace-king. We don't really want to play the flop through 3-way with Renzo in the pot, and he's likely to come along every flat because he is a fish. So, and when we flop top pair, we're behind of ace-queen, which he can feasibly play like this pre-flop, but we're ahead of so much for the rest of his range that we just expect to win lots of money by bet jamming. I'm going to make it a bit bigger than usual on the turn because I expect him to call with all his draws, and then if he has some ridiculous amount left behind on the river, he might be tempted to call with some 4th pair type hand he's backed into. And I think that should have left about 30-40% pot behind on the river. I think against Rezeal, he's a type player. He's not the type to be firing 3 barrels as a bluff here, so we just need to say, we just need to not care about our range. For what it's worth, that's probably pretty close to the top of it, and fold pretty much ace 10 there. In the spots, ace 5 is pretty close between a bet and a check, because he's probably betting a little bit too much against missed c-bets. That's a 69% stats, and he's folding a little bit too much to c-bets. I don't think it's really feasible to bet for value. 5s, I think we can just fold here. I think this guy's range of betting his flop is going to be pretty strong. When Munfei bets a turn, I think we need to call once more, because lots of our flop check calling range is ace high. But we can happily fold some rivers, though this is an interesting river, and it might be one we can check raise, because we do block a lot of straights. Although we don't block diamonds, we block sets too. I think it's probably a good spot to check raise. I think he should probably be folding 2 pair in that spot. I mean, we do have value hands there. We play kings like that. We check call a lot of ace high flush draws on a flop. So I guess a lot of 25 regs will snap that, thinking, oh, he doesn't rep anything, but that's simply not the case. But I think perhaps, considering he likely perceives us to play like he would on the flop, I think possibly check raising that river is a mistake. I'm not sure. Again, it's a stack that's short. We don't want to be playing hands like 4-3 off. And I'm tempted to raise this river again because we do block nut spades. But again, I'm actually tempted to call. I don't see how he has many value hands. I don't think 10x bets this river unless it's Jack 10. We block most of his nut flush draws. And he is fairly nitty with value bets, so I think this is probably a call. Okay, he turns this out. I'm fairly confident that's a profitable call against his range. Because he can't really have that many flushes, although he should be calling pretty wide in the blind. I don't think he's calling as wide as he should, so he doesn't have like Queen 3 suited, Queen 3 of spades there. I think this guy, based on my notes and the situations in which I take notes, might not even be value betting Jack 10 on that river, which is obviously a big mistake. I think we can just bet pretty small on this flop and hope to take it down a lot of the time. And we're 3 betting to isolate this fish, which is a very good result for us. And although it's a flop which hits his range quite often, he has a lot of straight draws on his texture, which isn't great for us. But I think with 2 overs we can probably just about get away with betting, and hope he's a type which folds second pair here, or whatever. But when we get called, I think we just need to check fold the turn. And on the river it's close. Some of the draws got there, but I don't think he's folding any of the value hands, and we beat a lot of his missed draws, so I think just checking back is best. In general, if you get to a river spot and you're wondering whether it's a bluff, consider whether you beat your opponent's missed draws. If so, if there are missed draws, if so, 7-5 off is a bit weak to call even against this size of a raise. If you do beat them as draws, then it's probably better just to use that hand as a check back and bluff some hand with less showdown value, because people will often check fold their hands with 0 showdown value on a river, even against a weak range, just because they're autopiloting. I think A7 suited could be a 3-bet there, but it's not something we want to do a lot. I think this guy has Ace-Jack, Ace-10 some of the time here, so we're going to exploitively bet a little bigger than we would normally and just bet 2 streets of value, because I don't think we're guessing any value from anything which isn't an ace anyway, because we expect him to check like kings through 10s on the flop. Ace Queen suited is obviously a standard open. And I'm not sure whether it might be a marginal mistake not to exploit the 25 population by betting a lot more ace-high hands on the flop, purely because I think that most of them still fold too much to c-bets. But I don't think it can be a big mistake, and I think it's going to be a bigger mistake if we bet them when we shouldn't. So I think it's safe enough to conclude that it's probably better to check them than bet them, especially when they're strong ace high and thus have decent showdown value. Ace Queen suited will be a 3-bet for value in that spot, but obviously we don't get raised. We have some backdoor straight draws here, but I think 3-way is best just to give this up. Against the fish, we're going to exploitively just bet close to all of our bluffs on that flop, and then give up turns, which, if you do that a lot, you will end up in with a pretty low turn barrel, but I don't think that's really a problem, considering you're doing it exploitively. We're going to bet this turn, even though we have basically no equity. We do have an overcard, and we expect him to have very weak ranges and to fold too much as a result. In addition, we can rep some weak Queen X and some Jacks, and Jacks, 10s, etc. Uh, 10-9 suited is close against this nit, but I think considering we've seen him 4 bets, Ace Queen suited, I think it'd be a little bit too tight to fold pre-flop. Obviously flop's standard call. I think we have to call this turn as well. And considering the flop was 3-way, we didn't have that much defensive responsibility on the flop, so it's actually pretty low down in our range. It doesn't really matter if we fold it, especially on a club turn. This river's pretty tough. If he bets, we block Jack 10, Jack 9. I think this is probably a call, because I expect him to spaz out with some ace-king combos here. We're guessing almost 3-1. If that flop was multi-way, that float is possibly too loose. Though on the turn, I think we just need to bet twice and fold out stuff. Yeah, and obviously he only really has jacks of value there. This river's close between a bet and a check. When he check calls a turn, I think he often has a 10. I think considering he opened under the gun most of his 10x are ace 10, so I don't think we should. I think we probably shouldn't bet the river. Oh, queens. Possibly we get a call there. I think he probably played the hand fine too as well. Notice, I should note that with the 10-9 hand here, okay, so we're c-betting this because we have some back doors. It's a flop we expect him to fold too much, blind versus blind especially, and he's folding too much to turn c-bets, it seems, so we can barrel effectively. Even with that said, I still expect him to continue with jacks, sometimes clubs, sometimes straight draws, so I think we have to bet this turn for value as well. I'll talk about the 9-10 hand in a second. And I think he expects us to have some misdraws here, so he might call the jack. With that said, we don't have many misdraws, so it's in a pretty appropriate spot to bet small. We're checking this flop because it's pretty low down within our range, and I think we can get more value by letting him spaz off. If he wants to bet check bet, that's fine. But he doesn't. I don't think he's going to call with pairs, and I don't think he bets a flop with them either. Okay, so here, the reason we're calling with 10-9, our hand isn't stronger relative to his range than a pair of eights, really. The reason we can call this is that we do block some of his combos that he might have randomly chosen to 3-bets, and bet flop and turn with such as Jack 9, Jack 10, which have a jack in them, which makes it better to call than just a naked 8. And also we don't block any of his bluffs because he probably turns pairs into showdown value here. I think here we can probably bet 3. We're betting pretty large. We have some equity. We expect us to be checking too weak a range on this flop because he's a 25 player. Unfortunately, we don't know whether he's a fish or not, but it's a pretty good hand to have in our betting range by the time we get to the river. Because on non-heart rivers we won't block any heart draws he might have. I'm betting small not only because of the paired board, but also because this guy's a short stack, so I don't think this is really good spot to barrel against a short stack fish. When he check raises a turn, I really don't know what he has, but I assume he's just played some aces terribly. I really don't know. I think here his range is just too strong. Because obviously I don't think he's folding a 9. Obviously he's not folding a queen or better. So when he check calls a flop, I think most of his non-pair hands have diamonds in them. And also there's a chance he might just be an absolute calling station and call a turn with ace high or something. This is a reasonable candidate to 3-bet even against under the gun, but the guy hasn't been folding that much to 3-bet so far, so we're not going to use it for that purpose. Jack 9 off is normally outside of my cut-off opening range, but there was a fish in the big blind, and people behind us we didn't know to be c-betting too much. Here we're c-betting because we have a spade, and people don't often flat non-suited hands that often, so we think he even has a flush or nothing most of the time, or obviously sometimes an ace. I would 3-bet or fold most of my entire range in the small blind normally, but with a fish in a big blind we can flat a lot of speculative hands. I don't think his hand is quite strong enough to barrel. Really I'd want a strong spade like the king of spades to barrel. And I expect him not to fold enough of his flop calling range on the turn, so I don't think he's folding. Obviously he's not folding flushes. I don't think he's folding at an ace, nearly often enough though I think he folds it most of the time to a triple barrel. And I don't think he's folding a good spade if he has any, maybe king queen of spades, queen or king and the queen of spades. When this guy checks a flop, he's doing it often, so I expect he's checking most of his showdown value hands, so I think ace 9 is actually doing pretty well against that range. We turn a boatload of equity, but I still don't see the need to turn our hand into a bluff. It's also nice to have some flushes on spade rivers. And here I expect him to bet the queen of spades on the flop. I expect him to bet the king of spades or ace of spades on the river, so I think now we can value bet this. I mean, just some size that you might call with some random flush. Against the random fish, I don't really think we can call this. I see about this rather. We do have a club that only gives us showdown value on club turns. Because we're unlikely to get squeezed behind and this guy's kind of bad, we're going to flat here. I mean, Queen Jack suited Jack tends to borderline hands in that spot, because especially if you are going to get squeezed often. And it's a texture on which we want to bet pretty large with our entire range. Even though we have in fact flopped a draw, which is strong enough to pretty much be happy with getting it in. I don't think we can value bet this river. He sometimes has ace-8 or whatever, and I'm not sure he always calls with the 7, so if he doesn't call with 7s, the value bet's a disaster. 8-7 suits is probably fine as a call there, but without stats on the guy, I didn't want to, and I'm not really trying to teach you guys to make incredibly marginal plays. Especially pre-flop. I think the underlying theme of pre-flop play, especially at Zoom, is that you want to that tight is right. I mean, obviously I'm playing 26-22, which is close to my standard, which is far from a nit, but I think the general tight is right adage still applies to the way I play, because I think I try and avoid spots which I find to be marginal. The reason I am fairly loose is that I think my post flop edge is sufficient to justify opening wide ranges in lots of spots here. I think 10s is just a little bit too strong to fold here, even though the guy seems fairly weak tight. He is positionally aware, so that could be a sample size thing as well as his short 3-bet stat. Queens I flat against under the gun as a standard, and on a drawy board we're betting pretty large with 10s. And now we're betting 3 with queens. I don't. 4-2 suited is probably on the borderline here between raising and would be between open raising and small blind, because he is folding a bit too much to steals. But I think it's probably just about better to fold it. 10-7 with the 10 of spades would again be close between betting and checking on the turn. But I think it was 5-way, which I think is just a bit too much to bet. Normally I'd bet smaller on his texture with my entire range, but against the fish we can just alter our bet sizings exploitatively. This is meant to be a 3x, by the way. It's just a misclick. With fish in the blinds, normally I wouldn't open any. Normally I wouldn't just open any suited ace under the gun as a standard, but with fish in the blinds, I think we kind of have to. I think something lots of people get wrong is that they don't defend their big blind enough against busting steals. I'll talk about it in a second. When this guy checks back the flop, he nearly always has overs at best, so we can bet twice and expect him to fold far too much of his range. And of course, the fact that we also have overcards is pretty good. Okay, so I think nearly a lot of people fold significantly too much in the blind against steals. Again, opening this because of the fish in the big blind. I mean, I don't think you should be concerned with... I don't think that's a bet against the fish, actually, but that's a mistake. I don't think you really need to be concerned overly with game theory maths. That's math for Americans, maths for English people. But I think it is indicative that if you're folding, say against a button min raise, if you're folding 70% in a big blind, you're folding significantly too much, and that's often going to be inadvertently exploited by people just playing their standard game without really recognizing that's you are playing an exploitable style, and I think that's the point at which you do have a problem with your frequencies. And also I think that knowing correct defense frequencies. Why is he check raising this flop? We're going to float this because he's check raised. This will make 3 out of 4 flops. So I think he's probably a bit of a spaz. And now we're going to bet the turn, expecting to fold a lot. If he double check raises, then obviously he's just terrible. Okay, so yeah, the other main reason why I think it's useful to understand these optimal defending frequencies is so you can learn when to exploit people who are just particularly a long way off them. And of course, I should say we don't know what an actual optimal defending frequency is, but we know what it's not. So we do have some useful information. We can estimate what it is and not be completely wrong. I think ace-9 is probably strong enough to value bet the flop here. Probably checking back turn and betting rivers. What are my notes on this guy? He could have ace-king here, so I think this guy's range might be too strong for us to value bet the river even. I think... how often does he check raise a flop? Okay, he never check raises a flop, so he has all his draws here. I don't think he flats a flop with an 8. I've seen him miss value, so I think he is probably a little bit too bluff heavy here. So I'm going to call, but I think I'm going to be behind some of the time. In a 3-way pot, there's no real need to float this. And on the turn here against the fish, I'm just concerned with getting money in. He has a flush some of the time because fish play weird. But I think if we don't get lots of money in with a set against the fish, we're making mistakes. And with that said, I don't think we can really donk this river. Sometimes he plays queens like this. Sometimes he does have a flush, and I'm not sure he's calling a shove with ace-king if he plays it like this. I think it's possibly closer to a fold even than a shove, but I don't think it is a fold. Okay, that's awful. I think 3-way against unknowns, we can just bet this and print money, especially with some equity. And I think on this turn we just want to give up because I don't think he's going to fold spades, even though he's dead against a 9. On this river, I think we just bet small, just to fold out. Just fold out any random spade hand which beats us. He's gonna call ace high. This guy's tight under the gun. He doesn't see bet often, so we can fold ace queen there, especially with no backdoors. Yeah, I think the hand, this hand here with 6-2 suited is probably quite a good point to make. If you do reach rivers with the nut bottom of your range and or the bait close to not low at all, and some draws do miss, it's probably good just betting like a quarter pot because it's going to be profitable for the times that your opponents fold out. Again, when he checks his flop, I think he's overwhelmingly weak, so we're just going to bet 3, even though this does not form part of a balanced strategy. Your opponents are often sometimes going to have draws which beat you. So here he could have something which doesn't chop with the board. Jack 10 of spades. And they're often going to check those behind, even though they should probably be bluffing them pretty often. We can't fold this river even though he bets fairly big. Again, we've capped our range. In terms of ace-x, we're only beaten by ace-queen or better, and flushes. So he doesn't have many, especially considering the ace and queen of hearts are on the board. Though of course he will sometimes have a flush. I'm going to take a note that he bet big with a value hand there. With the heart we can just see bet against the fish there. And I think sometimes you have showdown value on this river, so we shouldn't bet. And that's kind of the corollary of this point here. If you do have some showdown value against misdraws, and I think I mentioned this earlier, you probably shouldn't use that hand as a bluff. That's weird. His sizing's weird, but I'm not going to take a note. So you can bluff small against misdraws. I think he's probably a fish. If he was a reg, I'd bomb turn river because he's capped when he just flats that flop. I'm going to bet the turn anyway, just because you have so much equity. And I'm going to bet the river to fold out misdraws and hopefully sometimes fold out 9x, etc. Even though he's a fish. I never really finished this point here. I think the river's probably a bit too big there, but I want to give myself a chance of folding out, say, a weak jack as well. So, okay, I'm going to finally get around to this. The reason why you're betting so small is because it isn't going to really affect his calling range. And so we can be pretty happy. We can be pretty happy that we're going to get enough folds. I think a quarter pot here needs folds. We're getting 4-1 on our bluff, so we need folds. My god, this is bad. 20% of the time, which is easily going to be going to occur by the times he has misdraws, etc. When he checks a turn, I mean, sometimes he's checking some ridiculous slow play, but I think we need to bet for value again. The river's pretty close, but considering he seems fishy, I'm going to bet for value. Pretty small because his draw's missed. And I'm still not confident that he doesn't have like ace jack of spades here. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's got a really strong hand here. I don't think he jams the river there with kings, with pocket kings even. I think our river value bet's possibly good. Probably good because I think he probably checks aces and ace king on that flop if he knows what's good for him. But lots of people are still going to really struggle to fold those hands, even if they should be low enough in their flop check call range to do so. I think I've finished explaining this point, but if I haven't, please let me know. King 4 suited is pretty loose here. I think it's strong enough to raise though, especially considering a guaranteed position for the hand. We're betting small on the flop with our range because it's a paired board, and it's just, and for that reason, we want to force him to, well, from a game theory perspective, we want to force him to defend wider than he can with his range. From a more standard perspective, we want to give ourselves a good price on a bluff. I don't know why I've got him tagged as a fish here. I assume he's been playing one table or something. Oh, that's tough when the killer raise is so big. I think if we get it in, we're mostly going to be against sets and not flush draws, so I don't think that's an option. For that reason, I don't think 3-betting is an option, because I think he's going to defend too much by 4-betting for that to be good. What's the standard sizing here? So 2.53. And obviously with getting some showdown value, we can definitely check call this turn. And we probably check fold the river because we block his bluffs. here we fold the river. Basically, all of the hands he check calls a flop with, and bets the river a value hand. So his sizing is significantly too big as well. For that reason, it should be noted. I'm tempted to jam this river. We block 7/8. I mean, we only fold up bluffs. That's the thing. If we make raise to this size, so I think that's bad considering we've concluded we can't call. And here we're just going to decide so we can bet flop shove turn against either of them. Yes, I'm shoving the turn. I'm just making it look as though it's a decision. And I know that's a bit cheesy, but I would do this with bluffs too, because I'd be thinking about whether to bluff the turn. And he calls with 6-5 off. Okay, he's got a double aggressor, but obviously he's not guessing odds there. I think that you've got to remember that it's any limit, but especially at the micro stakes, you are going to make most of your money from fish, so a lot of your development should be focusing on maximising against fish, rather than some clever new line which is going to bamboozle the regs. Although it's obviously cool if you can learn how to beat the regs too. We're just going to flat this here because there's a fish in the big blind. Although I think it could be a flat as a standard unless there is a really aggro squeezer here. This is a good spot to check raise. He's c-betting a little bit too much. We have all kinds of backdoors. Though I think three-way, ideally we'd have more along the lines of more actual equity to c-bet that. On a turn, if we bet 8, 26, 21 is 26 on the river, so I think that's a good sizing. And the river completes a spade draw, and I don't think he snap calls a turn with a spade draw, so I think it's pretty good river to shove. That's a pity. I think his river call is pretty bad because he really doesn't block anything relevant. He has a hand which is fairly high up in his range in terms of absolute strength. Let's see, but this 3-bet's just small enough that we need to call this. But he doesn't have any useful blockers. We don't have kings anyway. We do have spades when we do have spades as well. I think this is a good spot just to shove here. I'm going to think about it for a second. Because we don't rep a whole lot, so I think he's going to level himself a lot. We can have clubs here and be bluffing like king of clubs, queen, and king queen of clubs obviously doesn't check the flop. I don't know what this guy's doing, but I'm just going to fold. And he often has showdown value, and I think he knows we know that. Given he often has a queen here, I'm just going to bet pretty big and hope to get called, whatever. I mean, I could possibly even have gone closer to pot there. Against a fish, we can definitely barrel ace turns, even with parts, probably with our entire range, even the parts without any equity when called whatsoever. I mean, I'm going back to the Jack 10 of hearts hand here. I think his flop call is too loose as well. We check raise 3-way, that reps a really strong range, and I don't think it's a hand we should be bluffing with from a theoretical perspective. But against the population on the river, I think it's just a spot where we can exploitatively shove our entire bluffing range, which isn't that big. It should be noted by that stage. Excuse me. Excuse me. I need to blow my nose. Oh. Okay, he's folding far too much to see bets to be a good reg. And when he's CC betting too much, so when he checks back, I'm assuming he's pretty weak. Far too often to not to bet close to our entire range. We're going to call turn bets here. We're not going to bet the river though. Because we have equity against his Jack X hands, and he can often double barrel hearts diamonds there. Okay, he's bad. He opens ace off under the gun, and he c-bets that flop. Oh, actually, I guess the c-bet isn't too bad, but considering he has backdoor clubs in a gut shot, but yeah. This is a flop. I think we're going to often struggle to defend enough far range on, so I think 8-8 and 8 here is definitely a call. If he barrels, I think shoving is an option. Here, it's close between betting and checking. I think if we bet, our checking range becomes really weak. I guess we have ace-8 suited, possibly some weak king X. So I am going to check, but I am going to check nonetheless. And I don't think we can value bet this river. I don't expect him to call with pocket 7s or worse. Yeah, okay, that's bad. 8 is just to give up here. Well, I think we probably have to call a turn bets, but I don't think we can value bet at any stage, even on the river. This is a fairly standard flop bets. And on the turn, I think we should bet again. He seems fishy, so I think we can get value. He rarely has queen X as well. This river spot's tough. I think we have some king queen here. Though I possibly value bet that, I'm not absolutely sure. I think when he I think in general the population isn't bluffing enough in that spot, so I think we can exploitatively fold. Well, I'm not sure if it's exploitative even, but I think even were it not, we could exploitatively. Were it exploitative to fold there, we could exploitatively fold. I like his line. I like his overbet there. Though even though we do have queens and he doesn't, that's pretty much the only nuts hand we have that he doesn't, and he has a lot of nutty hands that we don't. I was actually tempted to float the turn and jam club rivers, but I think that's a little bit overcomplicated. Okay, that's what's that? 13x. Yes, I know my 25 times table. Yeah, I mean the reason we fold, which probably indicates we're folding too much, is that he's 3-betting a lot in this spot. So, well, even over a limited sample, it's still an a very high amounts. I think the population is probably very value heavy when they overbet, so it's good just to fold most of the time. This is quite close on the flop. On the turn, it's very close again. I think we can fold because although we have a gut shot, it's not very valuable. Our flop check calling range, especially big blind against under the gun, is going to contain a lot of hands which are which are ace-x rather than anything else. I think it's a good spot to donk. Because we have all the sets, obviously he's not perceived to see bet his flop too much. And now obviously we're just betting turn shoving river because I don't think we're perceived to have many threes in our range. If we bet 5.4, that's going to get stacked in against either of them, and I think we have to call this river. I think the only hand he really reps aces, and the time pocket eights is the only other one. Ace king, that's obviously played terribly. That's not the greatest river. I am going to jam. The flush draw's missed. I think he can call with small overpairs for that reason, and also he seems kind of bad. And I think he raises most of his sets on the flop. I'm just going to check what that is. Pocket nines, okay. I'm going to take a note on that in a second. That's too big on a turn with ace queen, by the way. Our range is just too strong for that sizing. So, because of this on the river, I think we need to bet really small. What the hell is he doing? My god. I think that's the other thing that's the other difference between 25 and 50. I've noticed you get a lot more of the what the hell is he doing factor at 25 than at 50, so you can often see people show up in some spots with very weird hands. I think his turn check is absolutely awful there. Actually, I'm going to take a note on his flop bet sizing. I think we can fold this turn, considering the flop is three-way. Against a min-bet we have to call, but it's not a strong hand. Okay, he's obviously missing value bets. And we have showdown value against him missed draws. We don't expect him to fold any made hand, really, ever. When he pots the river, I think he's got some weirdly played eights a lot of the time. I think this hand is just about strong enough to bet for value / protection on... Nines is just about strong enough to bet for value / protection on his flop. Oh wow, I've just realised this is nearly an hour long. When he check raises this flop, when people check raise paired flops, it's so often full of shit. So I'm going to peel this. I'm actually going to sit out next big blind. I'm going to call it a turn because people borrow, but I don't think they shove rivers like that at all. Okay, that's pretty awful. With backdoors, straight draws, and king high, which is often good, we can float this flop. Well, we're calling it turn because, well, we've just turned top pair. And though we do have spades in our flop calling range, I think he never checks a turn with a flush. So I'm going to bet twice for value here. I think my bet size is too big, but because we rarely have bluffs there. But whatever. Actually, I'm not sure about that, considering it's blind against blind. We float that flop pretty wide. Against two fish, I think we need to value bet this. Against two regs, I think we can check call that flop. And we're going to forward to a check raise. I think I need to pay more attention to how long my videos are getting, because this particular one I checked at half-hour mark. Obviously it wanted to be a little bit longer at that stage. Then I thought, oh, I'm going to play some more, and didn't check for half an hour, and all of a sudden you've got an hour-long video. So I guess you guys are either lucky or unlucky. So I'm going to recommend that if you do want to watch this as one video, you split it into 2 parts. I'm actually going to record more of this session just when I get back. So thanks, guys. Bye.